Now, we finally got Leon Rose to pop out of the woodworks and finally give an interview, but the interview definitely came with a lot of trick bags in it. A lot of media games that they like to play, but don't worry about it, because we're going to break this down layer by layer.
We just going to peel it back layer by layer.
Because definitely for Leon Rose this summer, it's definitely going to be a surgical summer, because unlike previous Knick presidents, Rose has actually had a chance to come to the squad with an empty canvas to paint on. He doesn't have to dump salary and fire coaches. He actually got to come in to choose his own head coach. He had the open availability of having plenty of picks, plenty of cap space to actually design this team in a way that he saw fit. So Leon Rose is beginning to reach a pivotal point in his reign as Knicks president, where he's gonna have to start answering a few questions on the decisions that he's made. And boy, the rollout of this interview was insane, and especially the timing of it.
Tick, tick, tick. How much time he got, that man is.
First of all, they rolled out this interview in the part of the season in which the fan base already know we're not making the playoffs, so a lot of them already checked out on watching the games, especially with Julius Randle not playing the last 2 weeks of the season and then RJ having that injury. So the last game of the season in which they rolled out this interview in the pregame show, already with no RJ, no Randle, and I'm pretty sure they already had the analytics showing that a lot of the fan base had already dropped off from the ratings. That's when they decide to drop this interview. Very interesting, but pay attention to the timing, because these are the type of media games they like to play. And we also got to look at the fact that the only way you could have seen the full interview was during the pregame show, because there is no replay of it on the MSG Go app. Also on their social media accounts, there's no actual full replay of this interview, which is ironic. And then they sprinkled the interview, parts of it, throughout the game when it was airing live. So why this interview is kind of being put in the tuck, I don't know, because it was an in-house MSG interview. It's not like Mike Breen was going to ask him a bunch of tough questions. Not like outside media, because I'm pretty sure if it was outside media, they would have questioned him on Kemba Walker, how they took that gamble, and now that it didn't work out, what's their next idea or next plan, how they're going to approach that, or can they actually go young and rebuild and develop while Tibbs is the coach? Because as we all could see throughout the season, he's kind of stuck in his ways with certain lineups. And also an outside media source will question him on his trade for Cam Reddish, while Tibbs clearly had a hesitation about playing him. What was the thinking behind that? But we definitely gonna hear what Leon Rose had to say, because I waited a few days to see if the full interview would come out, and it never did. But moves like these had definitely confirmed what I thought and what I said in the last episode. I believe it's part of his contract in which they kind of shield him from the media and protect his image, because Leon Rose is a private guy, and he is a big dog in this NBA space, in which he has a long history of just having a good reputation among those NBA inner circles. But that noise is getting louder from the fan base wanting to hear from Leon Rose, and they acknowledge that in this interview.
You know, you've talked a lot about the Knicks fans and how passionate they are and how wonderful they are. And they want to hear from you. And we've kidded you before about this. You're a private person. You don't love being in the spotlight. You like just going about doing your job. But as you know, the success you had before you came here was all about relationships. Well, the fans want to have a relationship with you too, and they want to hear from you. So when you tell them this, it means something to them. Can we hear more from you for the fans? Because I've had fans say to me, we need more from hearing from. Can we hear more from you in terms of talking to the fans to let them know where you think the team is and where they have to go?
No, I appreciate that. And, you know, I want to please the fans. That's, you know, very much important to me, important to this organization, from the standpoint of giving them something they can be proud of, they can root for, they can feel good about. And, you know, anything I can do to contribute to that, I want to do it.
Now, that was a nice way of him telling the fan base what they want to hear, but at the same time, he didn't really tell them nothing. And it's very unfortunate, because I understand that Leon Rose is a private guy, but the media landscape today, especially with social media, they're going to be at some point pressured to respond to the noise. The same way Julius Randle has been pressured to respond to a lot of the noise this season. And Mike Breen even asking that question is the acknowledgement that they're feeling some of the pressures and hearing a lot of the noise that's being made on social media. This Leon Rose reign is going to be very interesting, because we're dealing here with a private guy that's working in an environment where he has direct to consumer feedback off rip, especially due to the fact that he had an empty canvas to paint on when he first came to the Knicks, and he's made a bunch of decisions, and now he's going to get judged on it. It's only so long that MSG can hide Leon Rose from the fans and the outside media.
Tick, tick, tick. How much time he got, that man is.
Now, Leon Rose had also spoke on Tom Thibodeau, which he finds himself in a very unique circumstance with Tibbs because they have a long history together. And the position that Leon Rose is in right now, in which certain moves ain't work out, like the Kemba Walker, and just them having kind of a plethora of young players on the roster, they may have to go through a slow development phase in order to get good. And then when there's an opportunity to make a trade, perhaps for a disgruntled superstar, then they can make that move. But he's going to have to ask himself, is Tibbs going to be the right guy to have to develop young guys, especially to give them plenty of burn on the floor to make sure that they have enough experience? Because Tibbs don't really have a history of doing that. This situation almost reminds me of when you see the rappers, they hire their best friends as security. And then when they go out, they wonder why things tend to happen because your homeboy, just like you just came out of the club, y'all both lit, but he's supposed to be your security. You love him, that's your boy, but he clearly can't do the job. He's not fit to do the job right now. The same scenario might go for Tibbs. Leon Rose might have a long history of a personal relationship with him, but right now, the fact that there's barely any free agents to go get, the team can't just win off rip right away. You can't build it that way. We're gonna have to go through a slow process of just kind of developing and rebuilding. Is Tibbs the right guy to have? Once again, this situation reminds me of the rapper that has his homeboy as security. I'm like, damn, they both just stepped out the club lit, and this is supposed to be his security. Even though the rapper's homeboy may be built up and look scary and look like he could do the security job, but the fact that he can't control himself around all the liquor and women, he's just not the right fit for the current situation. So adjustments should be made, or that might end up being your ass. And the same thing would apply here with Tibbs. If they're gonna have to go young for a while, he's gonna have to look at Tibbs. And if Tibbs ain't the right fit and he takes too long to make adjustments, he might just end up being on the chopping block. But Leon Rose, just like the rapper, he still gives his homeboy a vote of confidence to do the job.
As far as Tibbs' performance goes, I mean, again, he's, you know, one of the best coaches in the NBA. Obviously, none of us are happy with the results this year. But he's a guy who, you know, prepares our team better than anybody. You know, I feel that he's done a good job under the circumstances.
Now, a good follow-up question to that would be, what are the circumstances in his eyes that he views that Tibbs is under? Because right there, Leon would then have to acknowledge the slip-up at point guard that the Knicks are lacking, and it's leading up to Tibbs having to struggle to balance and juggle his rotations. And also, it's leading to a lot of struggles for Julius Randle because he's not getting the ball in his position. He's getting the ball at the top of the key at the three-point line. But moving along, right after this clip of Leon Rose speaking about Tibbs aired, Mike Breen and Walt Clyde Frazier actually spoke about some of the loud noise that's being made about Tibbs' reputation about playing young guys. Once again, this is proof of the acknowledgement of a lot of the online noise that's being made about Tibbs and certain things coming from the fan base. Leon Rose, a private man, has to go from dealing with the NBA on the back end side, where he normally doesn't have to hear from the consumers, to now being front facing, where his job results gets direct feedback from the NBA consumers, aka the fans. That's going to be something completely new to him.
Tom had the reputation for not playing younger players. He was very inflexible, but we saw that flexibility this season.
Well, Quentin Grimes became part of the rotation before a couple of times his progress was halted because of various things. And meanwhile, now you're seeing these guys like Toppin and quickly get a lot of time, and some want to see even more time for the younger players.
Right.
But I've had so many coaches, and UB Brown has always talked about this. It's hard to question coaches' rotations when you're not at practice every day and seeing what the guys are doing. And when you know what the sets, both offensive and defensive, are, and you know who's made the mistake.
Mike Breen is right about us not being at the practices, but there are a couple of contradictions in this whole scenario, because Leon Rose then talks about building the team the right way, taking their time on decision makings as far as trades, etc., and the team having a lot of draft picks. I believe he said we had 13 draft picks over the next 3 years, including 4 first-round picks. And then we already have a lot of young guys on the roster. So these things adding up with Tibbs, it doesn't really make any sense. Building the slow way, especially with a coach that's stubborn, playing young guys, and just having more pieces to add more young guys to the team. So it continues to make us ask ourselves, is rebuilding in a slow way even possible with Tibbs as your head coach? Especially with the vote of confidence Leon Rose gave to Tibbs earlier in the interview.
One of the questions I asked him was, when he first took over, he said he was going to build it the right way, be pragmatic in his approach. We asked him, after a rough season like that, will they keep that same mindset?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we have to stick to the plan. We have to take it one step, build one block at a time, be patient. We feel like we're set up, really well, as far as like we've got 13 draft picks over the next 3 drafts, 4 first-round picks. And with regard to opportunities that may come along, we feel like we're very flexible and able to do that. But again, we want to show patience, we want to show prudence, in making those decisions and continuing to develop what we have.
I'm telling you, all them injuries at the end of the season, they actually showed a proof of concept with playing the younger guys. The fan base saw quickly getting triple doubles. We've seen Obi having 30-point games, then a 42-point game. That kind of threw a monkey wrench on the public perception of Tibbs, as now a lot of the fans, they're going to double down on their stance that Tibbs is very stubborn to play the younger guys. After seeing the proof of concept at the end of the season, seeing guys like Obi and quickly flourish. But Leon Rose also touched base on how some of the young guys took advantage of this year's minutes, but also pay attention to how he matches up Julius Randle's timeline with some of the younger guys, which I always tell you guys, Julius Randle is part of the plan going forward, but I'll break down why later on in the show.
These guys have gotten an opportunity and taken advantage of it. And, for us, that's very exciting. I mean, Jericho going against starting centers, the 58th pick in the draft. Obi, the last, week or so has just, taken it to another level, scoring a career-high 35 last game. Quentin, who, had already established himself in the rotation. Deuce getting minutes and doing a good job with it. Quick playing point guard and showing some great signs. And, RJ, we forget RJ is only 21 years old. We have 9 players on our team that are 24 years old or younger. And, and Julius is only 27. So, all those things take, that we look at that like, development is key. And this part of the season, we've seen some good development, and we just need to work and continue on and build on that.
9 plays out of 15 is under the age of 24. And just hearing Leon Rose talk about development at this point of the season, you see their hand was forced now to start playing the younger guys more minutes. With Julius being out, RJ being out, Cam Reddish getting hurt, the lineup started getting depleted a little bit. Now they're forced to play the young guys. And even though half the team is under the age of 24, it still doesn't seem like developing the younger guys was ever a priority. See, this is where it's hard to take Leon Rose serious right here. But due to the fact that half your roster is young, and then you have 13 more draft picks for the next 3 years, and just a depleted free agency once again, you're going to have no choice but to develop. It's looking like that's the more likely way this team is going to take. Unless they're willing to blow everything up, get rid of all these draft picks, end up losing some key players, including RJ. If guys want to go after Donovan Mitchell, RJ will be gone. That will be part of the package, and I don't think it's worth that. But waiting to the very end of the season to start developing some of your young guys, it's very hard to judge the stats that they put up because a lot of teams pretty much begin to start checking out, or they already secured their playoff positioning. They're kind of dialing things back a little bit, going on cruise control and trying to stay healthy for the playoffs. It's definitely hard to judge, but Mike Breen touched base on this during the broadcast.
But we said this the other night, Clyde. End of the season, games like this, when, for example, this game means nothing to the Raptors. Obviously, the Knicks have been eliminated from any kind of postseason or play-in participation for a while now. You can't get seduced by some of the performances in the final weeks after a team has been eliminated. Because if you look down, half the league's players, their career high is in mid-April. When games don't, a lot of guys have their career high April 15th or April 8th, or when the games don't matter as much. So you do have to be careful when you're evaluating and making decisions based off games this late in the season that don't have the same meaning. At the same time, forget that. You can still see real growth and potential by some of these young Knicks.
Yep, you're right, Mike. Well, these guys have all the analytics, so they know when the team is under pressure and when the guys played. So that's what the Knicks will have to figure out.
I think it's one of the toughest things for a front office to do, because, you know, you have your players, you want your players to develop, you see them putting up some good numbers end of the season, but at the same time you have to be real careful in terms of your definitive evaluations.
Mike Breen nailed it right on the head. And some of our fellow Knick fans who love Obi, who love Quickly, especially when they start, been pleading Tibbs all season, just start them. You can't tell them nothing. But they're not going to want to hear this, because from October to January, there was only about 8 50-point games. And in the last few weeks of the season, from March 9th through March 23rd, there were 9 50-point games. That's how much players at the end of the season take their foot off the gas. So it's kind of hard to judge guys when they kind of go off at the end of the season, because we all know a lot of teams are already established getting into the playoffs. They're trying to get healthy, and the lines tend to get blurred on how good some of these guys really are, putting up a 30-piece, a 40-piece, a 50-piece. Things tend to get crazy. Once again, from the beginning of the season, from October to January, there was only about 8 50-point games. And then in the last 3 weeks of March, there was 9 50-point games in a 14-day span. That's how much guys take the foot off the gas. So once again, we love to see Obi and Quickly do their thing, but we can't just go off of those few games at the end of the season and just say, hey, fuck Randall, start Obi, and then put Quickly as a starting point guard. We still gonna need a little more time to have a proof of concept with both of those guys putting in work from the beginning of the season all the way into the end. But it's also a blessing in disguise, because now this kind of throws an alley-oop for maybe the front office to put a little pressure on Tibbs to play some of the younger guys for more extended periods of time. Now, Leon Rose was also asked about some of the upcoming contracts, especially involving RJ Barrett and Mitchell Robinson, which I found very interesting, because remember, this is an in-house interview. So it's an MSG interview. So I don't know if they're kind of leveraged certain questions to kind of get a picture to Mitchell Robinson that they want to negotiate more, because he talked about how he's still in negotiations with Mitchell Robinson all the way through until free agency. So that's interesting that they threw that question in there. So once again, you got to pay attention to the media games here, because this is an in-house MSG interview. So tough questions won't be asked. But I was surprised they asked about Mitchell's contract. That tells me that they're probably kind of took a break from negotiations, but they kind of threw it out there that they're still trying to negotiate with Mitch. So they're trying to let their camp know something through this interview. Or they're trying to let the fan base down easy by letting them know, hey, we've been trying to negotiate with Mitch this whole time and we ended up losing him. But remember, we told you guys back in the springtime that we were negotiating with him all the way up until free agency. These are the media tricks that they play, man. Boy, I'm telling you, why would they throw that question in there in an in-house MSG interview? There's a reason why they talked about Mitch. They didn't throw in any tough questions throughout the whole interview, but they threw in the most toughest question to ask about, because we knew all season the Knicks were in negotiations with Mitch back and forth, but still there was no agreement. So to throw in a Mitchell Robinson contract was probably throwing in the most done data of all tough questions you could ask. But there's a reason that they put that question in there. Remember, this is a completely controlled interview. All the questions being asked was already gone over.
Well, with Mitchell, there's been ongoing discussions throughout the year with his agent, and those discussions will continue, and will continue into for the remainder of the time until free agency.
All right, what did you see from him this year?
From Mitchell, I saw Mitchell. Mitchell had a phenomenal year. He, was our anchor on defense, and really took a nice step this year. And he even showed us a little bit on offense, especially that one through the legs, down the lane, and then the dunk.
And it's an unfortunate thing that Leon Rose has no leverage in these negotiations at all. Remember, it's all about the timing. And the timing of this situation, Mitchell Robinson last summer, when we had the leverage, he was coming off a season where he was not healthy for the whole year. And throughout his career, we really haven't seen consistency from month in and month out from Mitch. And that led us up to last summer, in which the Knicks opted into his final year for another $1.5 million. So he's made about $5 million in the last 4 years with the Knicks. He's probably gotten paid like 1.5 per year or 1.2 per year. Overall, in the 4 years he's been with us, once again, he's made $5 million. So we know for sure he's looking to get paid. And there's other teams, probably with more cap space. If they throw the $18 million a year at Mitch, he's going to go for it. Once again, from Mitchell Robinson's perspective, he's looking at how the Knicks operated last season. They opted in and paid him another $1 million for another year, thus making him an unrestricted free agent this summer. They drafted Jericho Sims, and then they paid Nerlens Noel money. So the two guys that sit behind Mitch got paid, and they opted in to underpay Mitch for another year. So we got to keep this in mind to understand the mindset of how Mitch is going to attack this year's free agency. He's looking to get paid. And let's not forget his uncle, how he went on Twitter and he said that he loved the Knicks, but he does not like Mitch's offensive role with the Knicks, and he can't wait to get his nephew off that team. That's what his uncle said. And you know how the new media games work. A lot of the players are speaking through their family members. We've seen it play out with Kawhi. We see it play out with Zion Williams, and now Mitch. Once again, we got to look at why in this interview that was filled with alley-hoop questions from in-house media members included questioning on Mitchell Robinson's contract. There's a reason why these things were put in there. And in my opinion, the Knicks are beginning to set up a nice cushion for a soft landing for Knicks fans to realize that they have lost Mitchell Robinson.
Easy money.
Now, Leon Rose also spoke about RJ Barrett's upcoming contract. Before the start of next season, the Knicks do have the opportunity to give him a rookie max scale extension. But unlike the Mitchell Robinson's contract questioning, Leon Rose chose not to divulge any information on the RJ Barrett's contract negotiations. Once again, his response to the RJ contract negotiation question, it just tells me everything I need to know about Mitch. And in my opinion, I believe he's already gone. But as far as RJ is going to negotiate his contract from a very unique position. I believe he may apply some pressure for the Knicks to get him some outside help.
RJ took a great step this year, took more responsibility, covered the best player on the other team on a nightly basis, and has really elevated his game. I can't really put a ceiling on where he'll go. As far as, the plan and negotiations, I think we'll keep that private for now.
RJ's contract situation is a little different. The Knicks, of course, they have the highest odds of re-signing him. It should eventually go that way. But the only thing I say is unique is because RJ, for a third-round pick, he's a little bit under performance-wise. He's a little bit under what his peers did around that same pick range in the draft. The contract he's eligible for is the same contract Jason Tatum got, Jaylen Brown, Donovan Mitchell, Trae Young. That around, I believe, 4 years or 5 years, 180. a lot of that is incentive based. You know, you got to make the All-Star, you know, etc. There's a lot of NBA first teams you got to make in order to hit that full amount. But I'm not sure if the Knicks are going to be willing to go that full amount. They actually might get him on a discount. Who knows? But the likeliness of the Knicks re-signing him is very high. I just don't know what the amount is going to be for. But once again, the fact that Leon Rose did not even give a hint about how the negotiations are going for with that contract with RJ, it just tells me everything I need to know about Mitch. Mitch is pretty much gone.
Surgical Summer Volume 1.